happened about 5 winters ago. I was renting a basement apartment in one of those old, drafty houses where the heat barely makes it downstairs. The air always smelled faintly of damp concrete, and I could hear the upstairs tenants through the ceiling. Every step, every creak. One Friday night, they left for the weekend. By midnight, the place felt so still. It almost hurt my ears. I stayed up on the couch, half watching late-night TV, when I heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not from the front door, not from the ceiling, from the wall, directly behind me. I sat there, barely breathing. That wall separated my living room from the landlord's storage room, a place he always kept locked. No windows, no other entrance, just the single door in my kitchen, with a padlock on it. I told myself it was probably the pipes, but a few minutes later came the sound of something dragging, slowly, across the concrete floor inside. A long scrape, like wood against stone, moved until it was right behind where I was sitting. I turned off the TV. The sound stopped. I grabbed my desk lamp, like a weapon, and walked into the kitchen. The storage room door looked exactly the same. Padlock in place, latch shut. I leaned closer, listening. 3 more knocks, right from the other side of the door. My hand hovered over the lock, but when I touched it, it was ice cold. I put my ear to the wood, and something slammed into the door so hard, the whole frame shook. I stumbled backward. I didn't open it. I didn't even turn off the lights. I left and spent the night in my car, watching the darkened windows of the house. The next morning, I called the police. They arrived with my landlord, who swore the room had been sealed for years. But the officers decided to check anyway. One of them broke the padlock, and the door groaned open. The smell hit first, a soured, wet stench that clung to the air. Inside, there were piles of filthy blankets, food wrappers, and empty water bottles. Someone had been living there. One officer shone his flashlight into the far corner and froze. There was a small hole in the wall, not much bigger than a dinner plate, leading it into the crawl space behind the walls. The inside of the hole was smooth, like it had been used a lot, and carved into the concrete floor over and over again were the words, "I watch you sleep." The cop closest to the hole bent down to look. He jerked back so fast, he almost fell, then shouted for backup. From the dark of the crawl space, someone laughed. I moved into the building in early 2020. It was nothing special. A 3-story walk-up with peeling beige walls and a faint smell of cooking oil that clung to the hallways no matter the time of day. The first person I met was Daniel, my neighbor across the hall. He looked about 40, average height, average build. The kind of man you wouldn't notice twice in a crowd. Always wore flannel shirts. Always gave a polite smile, but never too much conversation. The first time we actually talked was over the mail. He knocked on my door one evening, holding a brown package. "Think this was meant for you?" he said, handing it over. His voice was quiet, almost careful. After that, we'd nod in passing, exchange a few words about the weather, the slow landlord, little neighborly things. He seemed normal enough, but I noticed something early on. Daniel kept odd hours. Sometimes I'd hear his door unlocking at 2 or 3 in the morning, followed by soft footsteps down the hall. Not hurried, not drunk, just moving. In August, the hallway lights went out for almost a week. The building's maintenance was terrible, so at night the hall was pitch black. One evening, coming home late, I nearly bumped into him. He was standing perfectly still, right outside his apartment, in the dark. My phone flashlight caught his face, and he flinched before smiling. "Just heading in," he said quickly, fumbling with his keys. I laughed it off later, but in the moment, it unsettled me. Weeks passed. Then one evening, as I was unlocking my door, I saw the landlord talking to 2 police officers in the hallway. One of them glanced at Daniel's apartment door. When I asked what happened, the landlord shook his head and muttered something about a misunderstanding. A few days later, Daniel was back. He looked tired. When I asked if everything was okay, he smiled faintly. "People get jumpy these days," he said. And that was it. Then October came. One night, around 3 in the morning, I woke to a strange sound, a soft metallic scraping, slow, deliberate. It was coming from Daniel's apartment. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped into the dark hallway and listened. The sound stopped instantly. I was turning back toward my place when his door opened a crack. Daniel stood there, no lights on behind him. "Could you help me with something?" he asked. His voice was too calm, too flat. Every instinct screamed no. I muttered that I was busy and slipped back into my apartment. The next morning, his door wasn't fully closed. I hesitated, then pushed it just enough to see inside. The smell hit first, a sharp mix of bleach and something metallic. The blinds were drawn and the living room was dim. The coffee table had been shoved against the wall, and on the floor were photographs, hundreds of them, all printed on glossy paper, arranged in neat piles. Every single one was of people in the building, in the laundry room, checking their mail, unlocking their doors. And in the center of one pile was a photo of me, sleeping. My stomach dropped. I stepped back into the hall, and the door behind me clicked shut. I spun around. Daniel was standing there, holding the knob with one hand, and something heavy in the other. It took a second for my brain to register what it was. A hammer. "You shouldn't be in here," he said quietly. My throat went dry. I took a step back toward the stairs when he stepped forward. "Where are you going?" His voice was still calm, but the hammer lifted slightly. I turned and ran. He lunged, grabbing my arm, the hammer swinging past my face, missing by inches. I kicked back hard, breaking his grip, and bolted for the stairwell. I could hear him behind me, heavy footsteps, faster now. By the time I hit the second floor, my legs were burning. I nearly tripped on the last step, but kept going, slamming into the front door of the building and spilling out into the street. I didn't stop until I reached the corner store a block away. The clerk called the police. By the time they arrived, Daniel's apartment was empty. No furniture, no clothes, just the photos. And in the very center of the living room floor was a new one, me, running out of the building. When I first saw the listing, it seemed perfect. 2-bedroom farmhouse on the edge of town. Rustic charm, the ad said. Large yard, quiet neighbors. The landlord, a heavy-set man named Donnelly, gave me a quick tour. The place smelled faintly of old wood and dust, but it was cozy enough. We passed a narrow door at the very end of the hall. I reached for the handle, but Donnelly stepped in front of me. "Storage," he said quickly. "This part's off limits. Previous tenants left a mess. I didn't think much about it. It was a good deal, and I signed the lease that day, The first week was normal. Quiet nights, cool breezes through the open windows. But then I started hearing it, a faint scratching sound from the far end of the hall, always from behind that locked door. It wasn't constant. Sometimes days would pass without a sound. But when it came, it was slow, deliberate, like fingernails on wood. One evening, I came home to find the door slightly ajar, just a sliver, enough to see darkness inside. My curiosity got the better of me. I pushed it open. It wasn't a storage closet. It was a small windowless room, maybe 8 feet across. Every inch of the walls was painted a deep, uneven red. Not bright, more like dried blood. The floor was covered in carved symbols, circles, jagged lines, strange letters. In the center sat a low wooden table with melted candlesticks, and in the middle of it all, a Ouija board. Old, warped, the letters nearly faded away. The planchette rested in the center, pointing toward yes. I know I should have left it alone, but something about it pulled at me. I sat down on the floor. My fingers hovered, then rested lightly on the planchette. "Is anyone here?" I whispered. For a moment, nothing. Then the planchette scraped against the wood and slid to yes. The air felt heavier, hotter. "What is your name?" The planchette jerked. It moved in slow, deliberate circles before spelling Malachai. A shiver ran through me. I was about to ask another question, and the board moved on its own. Getout. The candles flickered violently. From the corner of the room, I heard breathing, slow, deep. Then the planchette slid again, faster now. N-O-W. I scrambled to my feet. The red walls seemed darker, closing in. As I turned toward the hall, I saw something in the doorway. Tall, thin. Its face was smooth. No eyes, no mouth. It started walking toward me. The floor groaned with each step. I ran, slamming the door behind me. The scratching sound followed, but faster now, like something trying to claw its way out. I made it to my bedroom, heart pounding, and then I heard it. The door at the end of the hall creaking open. Again. I peeked out. The hallway looked longer than it should have. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. At the far end, the figure stood there, hands twitching, tilting its head too far to one side. The lights began to flicker. With each flash, it was closer. Flash halfway down the hall. Flash right outside my bedroom door. The final flash, it was inches from my face. I woke up at dawn, lying in the front yard. The house stood silent. The red room door was closed. When I returned later for my things, the room was empty. No candles, no board. The walls were plain white, as if nothing had ever been painted there. Donnelly refused to speak to me. The listing went up again 2 weeks later, and in the new photos online, if you look closely at the very end of the hall, you can see a faint shadow, tall, thin, and standing exactly where I had seen it last.